Good morning, America. Just kidding. Good evening, America. Hey, nasty little day in the stock market. Let's dig into what the heck is happening and, what comes next. So, first we're going to go into the market indices, and then there are some good stocks that I think we can still come out and shred. We're going to have to be a little bit careful. We're going to need longs and shorts today. If you watch yesterday's videos, I had quite a few longs. And, we took some trades right off at the open and had to reverse. It was just that type of day in terms of the action. I was thinking, maybe we get a little pop in Tesla off that Elon vote that was coming up. And, dude, I had this thing like right off at the open and the opening dip. It took a couple points and it just dumped. I didn't even think about shorting it till it was a little bit too late. So that was, that's where your bias can get you sometimes. This was a crazy day because so many stocks were just getting nailed, right? And so we do got to do a little bit of a deeper analysis today and see what the heck is going on. But I don't think the structure of a lot of stocks have changed. But, the market is telling us something that, some of these stocks are due for a pullback, and we got them today. So it looked like we were going to kind of get this kind of bounce off the 20 SMA, but we never really tested it. Today we broke under it, right? And so let's see where the next targets are. Maybe it's the 600 mark. That would let off some nice steam, but the price action was just nasty today. So as we look at this, I think we're going to have to be a little cautious. The names that really, really dumped hard were kind of these names that had high price to sales, the really extended, overvalued names, the ones that didn't really have, that had the big runs and that are AI related. If you notice, a lot of the AI related offshoot stocks, some of them don't even have revenue, right? And so you saw really some really nasty moves in some of these things. And granted, look, they're up hundreds of %, right? So in the scheme of things, I think the uptrend on these and the highs have been put in for quite some time, but they still have room to fall. So let's dig into this because, the QQQs is at a sweet spot. If tomorrow we break under, today's lows, that kind of puts us back into, maybe some of this zone over here where, we may get some traction, and who knows, you never know, right? You can always go even lower. So we'll have to see how that works up. Now, the market has been super gappy lately. That's the problem. This is just a little rip under and then a break over. How they do it is they gap it and then you chase it, and now the price action has changed. And so if you're chasing the gap ups, you're faced with some decisions. Do you get rugged or does it follow through? And then you get one of those gap and grind days. That's what happens, when the market starts to shift. The easiest phase of the market is when you're just trending up all your EMAs. But now that you've broken under some of them and they're starting to point down, all of a sudden the gap ups can fade. And then randomly they'll just grind up all day like yesterday. And you're feeling really stupid that you didn't get enough exposure. And I think that's how I was feeling yesterday. I was like, man, you had this weird, rip, but the day before was so nasty. And then look, we rugged it again today. And so we're into that environment, up, down with a lot of range. So let's be mindful. If you look at some of the big names, man, Palantir got taken to the woodshed today. Looks like maybe probably 170 support on this thing. But that's a nasty down day. You're down 11 points on this. I think one of the interesting things, right? AMD, after it gapped down yesterday and was down to 235 in the pre-market, had an incredible turnaround. And that's what kind of led me to thinking today would be bullish. But with that jobs report coming out and other pieces of data coming in, the selling was fierce. If you look, especially on something like AMD, it opened down weak and then it didn't even give you a chance at the open unless we took this bear flag for, a couple points and, in the chat room, just for a few points, because I could not find myself an entry on this one. But that's a tell, right? You saw that reversal and then today, no go. And so we do got to be a little bit mindful of these things. You see stuff like Microsoft right after the OpenAI announcement, just straight down. So We're going to have to be a little bit careful, but I think there's still good-looking charts out there, both to the long side and downside. So there's very well a chance that maybe we're just entering an environment where it's like a little bit more of a stock picker's market. Now, I know a lot of people are saying, well, the breadth has been bad. What do you mean? It's like only a handful of stocks anyways. Well, not really. I mean, there's been all sorts of, it was a stock picker's market. It just happened to be all in the same basket of names, right? You're in your nuclear and your quantums and your AIs and stuff, and they're all kind of interrelated, but there was a whole host of them. Now I think things are going to be going into the year, maybe a little bit more, a little bit more tricky. So let's be careful tomorrow, but there were some good names that were still popping up today. The SPY looks just like the QQQs. So let's dig into the watch list and see like kind of what's going on here. I thought that some of these stocks had there was these earnings plays out here that really had some nice moves. FSLY had a big stick today. I think that's something we want to be looking at for tomorrow. DDOG, awesome earnings report. This thing is, dude, 200 is the ATH. It may need to rest before you get there, but this is the type of stock that can get going. They had a lot of good range, right off that opening candle. I mean, you went from 176 to 188, really, really quickly. There's some China names that are still picking up some steam here. 41 million shares traded on XPEV. Big breakout today. It didn't close right at the breakout spot, but you can kind of see here, it doesn't matter how you draw it, but that thing is looking zesty. Chinese stocks, these Chinese burritos suck to trade because they gap up so much. And so, if you're swinging, you're a little bit nervous because you don't want to get stuck in the gap downs. Say you use 5%, 6% gap downs. Well, these things gap up 5%, 6%, all the time. And so you have to be looser on the stop losses or kind of get them low. They're a little bit more tricky. You got to kind of massage the balls a little bit when you're playing these. But I love the overall look of this. BIDU has got a very similar kind of thing, right? It's just, you got this nice swoosh setting up here, and you're breaking this range. I like that look, but once again, this is one of those stocks. If you notice, see all these spaces on the chart, it moves a lot in gaps. But now this 130 zone is going to be important, and you can start to see the trend start to shift on this. I think this is, top of the list for tomorrow too. Lift had a really nice day here. This stock sucks to trade too. I've been watching this one for a swing trade for a while to see if it can tighten up. If it can tighten up and go, based on the, Uber and all of this stuff that's been happening, over the last year or so, maybe it's time for this thing to party. This one stinks to day trade too, so I'm only watching this one for a swing. Stocks like Lyft are really tough because it's you have to buy a bunch of shares and then they grind and you're just sitting there and then you get a random big candle and then they dump and, it's just a shitty day trader, but it's got a good overall look to it. Affirm had its earnings out, so I got this on watch to see if it starts to clear out, any of this range out here, but the location of this is weird. I'm not really interested unless it clears that. BABA, very, very similar look to BIDU. You got to test the 50-day moving average. You're starting to creep up. These are kind of lower ATR stocks than, what a lot of the American stocks have been lately on a open to close basis. So not, on a per day basis, but on an open to close basis. That's why you see all these kind of baby D, candles where you're just right? Am I really doing this? They make a little bit better swings than day trades. Hey, RIVN had an awesome move on earnings. You got a spot here. Let me get rid of all these lines. It looks like some Rorschach fetish, but man, look at that bad boy, right? An inside day today. So you got earnings, then you got an inside day. Dude, that's a good God-fearing Christian spot right there. Boom, 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 boom. I would consider you to also have an inside day. It would have been better if it was slightly tighter. But you can see after the big earnings day, right, you kind of nuzzling right under the bosom of the high of the previous day. I think this one's got a chance too. It had a chance to just dump it off, right? But it held up okay. Let's see what's up with this one. run, take off the list. UPST, if we need a short, I think this one's still like at a nice drift down. Like, I think we can take something like that down. OKLO's another one that you just got like, you know, you just got a bear flag on this thing. Like, you can see like you're just rounding. Then you had a little bit of a light pop, and now you're starting to take out the zone of love. Like, this has got room to fall. And when it breaks 100, and most likely will, then I think you start to see the cascading down into the 200-day moving average. I know it looks like it's down a lot from its highs, but you got to kind of take it in context of the overall move. And even they've come out and said, like, hey, we're probably not going to make any money for 15, 20 years, if ever, right? So just be a little bit mindful. I think this one's got a nice short on it too. It's a better location than like something like a SMAR that's just like sitting on the 200-day moving average. If you look at like, you know, the rest of these that are kind of like hanging out, this one I don't think has that good of a setup unless it breaks down here. RGTI does look like it wants a breakdown. You've got a bear flag here, and then if it kind of breaks under the 50, I think that's lights out on this thing. Once again, this thing's got a lot of room to fall. Even though it's down a lot, it's got a lot of room to fall. So keep an eye on this one. I'm watching this QBTS if it loses the 52, but to me, it looks like RGTI is the tightest. You got the cleanest levels because you got price support there to break under, and you got the 50-day moving average. So, guys, it's going to be important to have some longs, some shorts, some swings, and be prepared for like everything because there's not anything that's A+ right now. The market is showing, right, all signs of, you know, exhaustion, and it's been a lot more finicky on news. Like, you know, a month ago, the job sucked too, and nobody cared, right? Like a month ago, this thing sucked too, and nobody cared. Now, all of a sudden, the things that people didn't care about, they're starting to care about. And so that's your kind of telltale sign. On the large cap side, you know, Google's still hanging out here. So, you know, if the market picks up steam, it looks like, you know, you got yourself like a decent location on this one. I think SEDG had an inside day after that kind of earnings push. And I'm bullish on these solars. It doesn't look like Run did much of anything, but this was a big stick on SEDG here. And then you got a pretty tight range today. Like, let's see how this reacts. If this takes out this 41, you got a really clean level. Like, we can shred that. And then I think the last one is this EOC. If you can break this trend line, you know, let's call it 16 and some change. Now, it very well might not. You know, the basket of kind of risky names got taken to the woodshed a little bit today. I mean, there's also a shot, right? You make sure you don't anticipate this too much. There's also a shot it just breaks down here and, right, does it. But the reason I think it, you know, still looking bullish, its earnings were out today, right? It had every chance to sell off on its earnings. And, you know, it rolled over, it went red, and then it kind of, right, popped its way back. And, you know, at least when I left the computer, it was up 6% or so. So, guys, be careful tomorrow. This is a mixed bag. You know, we'll find some trades, but they're going to be scalpy McGee's. If I were a swing trader, I would be doing a lot more monitoring than buying things right now. And I'd definitely be making sure, like, all these, like, little turd nuggets that you were trading, like, just, you know, if you're stuck if you're holding the bag on stuff, just, you know, cut them and find some other shit to play. Market will firm up in a little bit. It usually does. All right, I love you guys. Peace.